So in the previous video we got technical, and Boxman is easily overwhelmed when it comes to these concepts which can at first seem very complicated, but I did my best to explain the cone of vision and the picture plane as simply as I could. I mean, this is simple perspective.
Initially, I was hesitant to even mention these things in a series that's made for beginners like this, but the more I thought about it and the more I looked ahead at what's to come, the more I realised how important and useful it was to understand, or at the very least, be aware of these concepts early on.
In this video, I'm going to explain the horizon line and at the same time reiterate some of the things that we discussed in the last video, which I assume you have all watched if you are watching this one. Remember that this is a series, you don't begin a TV show from the 4th episode.
Finally, I was wondering when you'd wake up, and I'm hoping you remember everything we went over last night. Anyways, good news, I found a map. Under the bed of all places, and you won't believe it, someone has already marked out the route we need to take to get from here to the nearest town. It's about a 20-minute walk from here, and whilst we are on the way, I can explain to you the horizon line. If you look out across this desert, you won't see much at all other than sand and sky. But we can see the horizon line. It's that separating line between the sand and the sky. For now, let's just say that the horizon line is always a horizontal and continuous line. And that's why when we are creating a drawing, the horizon line is drawn as a horizontal line across the paper, or let's say the picture plane. We can actually see that line in this desert here because there's nothing around us, but imagine if we were standing on a busy city street. You know, all of the buildings and cars around us would be blocking our view of this lovely horizon line. However, it would still be there, it's just obstructed. The horizon line is always there, there's no getting away from it.
Get off the road!
Hey, look, there's some train tracks over there. That's a perfect example of what I want to explain next. Don't worry, Boxman, I'll let you know if I hear a train coming. This is all in the pursuit of knowledge. Now, look ahead of you and you'll see the horizon line again. Also notice how these train tracks start to converge as they recede into the distance. You can see how the tracks, which we know are parallel, eventually converge to a single point, and that single point is on the horizon line. This point is a vanishing point. I'll be explaining vanishing points in more detail later on. As I mentioned a moment ago, when we look at this, there's nothing obstructing our view. We can see these train tracks and the horizon line. But even if there was a giant wall across here blocking our view, it wouldn't matter. The horizon line would still be there, and the train tracks would still converge to a vanishing point on that line. Right, Boxman, lay down. Seriously, lay down on the ground. Now, if you look in front of you again, you'll see that something's changed. The horizon line has moved lower down and is now closer to the train tracks. And this is because the horizon line is also our eye level.
Now I need to clarify something that confuses a lot of people, and in doing this I may create more confusion because it relates to some of the more complicated concepts that I brushed on in the previous video. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I do think it's important not to ignore these things, and so just give me a moment to explain this.
Here I have a piece of paper. Now, if I'm going to create a drawing in perspective, what's the first thing I need to do? A lot of people would assume we need to start by establishing the horizon line, and that makes a lot of sense, but as I mentioned in the previous video, there are other things involved when drawing in perspective. Things like the picture plane. This entire sheet of paper could be the picture plane, a window between the viewer and whatever I am drawing. Or we have the option to crop this down and outline our own picture plane, which is what I usually do. Remember that the picture plane is always fixed in front of the viewer, perpendicular to their line of sight. This means that as they turn their head and look in different directions, all of this moves with it. We've just learnt that the horizon line is also our eye level. This line is always level with the eyes. It also means that, in this example, the horizon line is placed across the centre of the picture plane. Even if Boxman was to turn his head and look left and right, the horizon line would remain central across the picture plane. The exception would be if Boxman was to tilt his head to look up and down. Now, this confuses a lot of people because whilst the viewer's line of sight has moved along with the picture plane that is perpendicular to that, the horizon line remains level with their eyes. Here's a good example from Perspective Made Easy. This guy might be looking down at some train tracks, but his eye level remains here. When the viewer's not tilting their head, meaning their line of sight is parallel to the ground plane and the picture plane is perpendicular to those, the horizon line will always be placed centrally across the picture plane, assuming that we have evenly sized the picture plane. In this scenario, we would be creating a drawing in 1 or 2 points perspective. I can find the centre of the picture plane by dividing it up diagonally, and then I can draw the horizon line across here. This central point is our point of focus.
Now, if I'm saying that the horizon line is always placed centrally across the picture plane, then why, when creating different drawings, do I sometimes place the horizon line at different levels on my paper? Well, I'm not saying that it has to be placed centrally across the picture plane, because the picture plane doesn't have to be a specific size.
The picture plane is simply a window that can change in size, allowing you to see as much as you want. You might have noticed this border which I added to resemble the picture plane as Boxman looks out onto the tracks. The horizon line, or his eye level, is across the centre of this picture plane. This picture plane captures Boxman's point of view, and everything inside this is what we are drawing, meaning everything outside of this can essentially be ignored. If this picture plane is our piece of paper, like I have here, then the horizon line is also across the centre of the picture plane as discussed. But let's say that I'm drawing those train tracks and I decide to place my horizon line lower down. If this was the case, then this is what we'd see. We wouldn't see much of the tracks at all due to the position of the horizon line in relation to the picture plane. But remember, the horizon line is fixed, level with the eyes, and Boxman hasn't moved. Instead, what's happened is this. The picture plane has moved upwards and the horizon line is now placed lower down. The picture plane is just a window. It's the one thing that's flexible in terms of size and position. When Boxman had laid down on the tracks, his eye level and in turn the horizon line had lowered as well, but so did everything else, including the picture plane. Because of this, we are able to see more of the tracks below the horizon line. Unlike in this scenario when the horizon line is lower down and we see more of the sky. And so in order to fix this, we can either extend the picture plane down to see more of those tracks along with the sky, or we can just keep it the same size and move the entire picture plane down, keeping the horizon line central. One very important thing to consider though when changing this picture plane is the cone of vision. That's also fixed with the line of sight running through the centre. The cone of vision is our safe drawing area.
So I hope that all makes sense. I could go on and explain all of this in more detail, but I'm sure it's something that I'll be discussing a lot throughout these videos, and I want to keep this one focused on the horizon line, which, remember, is also our eye level.
A lot of beginners get confused because they assume that the horizon line and the eye level are different. However, these are one and the same.
Your eye level and the horizon line is the height of your eyes when viewing an object. Moving forwards, I might refer to this as either the horizon line or the eye level, but just know that I am referring to the same thing.
Notice how that vanishing point has also moved with the horizon line. Vanishing points always exist on the horizon line, and don't forget that. Also, did you bring the video camera? Remember in the last video when I mentioned another mode of thinking? Instead of drawing what you see, imagine you are drawing what a camera sees. The term eye level is often used when you imagine you are drawing from the point of view of a person, the viewer. But in the same way, you can imagine you are drawing from the point of view of a camera. In this case, I like to say camera level, but again, it's all the same thing. If we place our camera on top of this tripod and look out onto the train tracks, you'll notice that the horizon line and the camera level moves along with the camera as we move it up and down, the same way that your eye level had lowered when you had laid down on the tracks. Wait, what's that noise? Boxman, get off the track. Whew, that was a close one. Anyways, that train must be heading to town. We can't be far now.
In the previous video, I was explaining how when we create a drawing in perspective, we are drawing from a specific point of view, and we imagined that we was looking at a simple table.
Here we are looking at this table head on. Our eye level is across the centre. If I was to lower our eye level, we'd now see underneath the table. If instead I was to raise my eye level above, we'd now see the top of the table. To put it simply, as objects move below this eye level line, we are essentially looking down at them, and as they move above the line, we are looking up at them. We can show multiple boxes all at once in a different position. Here, my eye level is across the centre, and we can see each of these boxes at different angles because of this. These are all drawn in 1 point perspective, and you can see how the parallel edges of these boxes converge to a single vanishing point. To give you an idea of what's to come, let's take this box, which is facing forwards directly in front of us, and let's rotate this box on an angle. All of a sudden, this box is viewed in 2 points perspective because there are now 2 vanishing points. If we then raise our eye level to be above the box and then we tilt our head down so that we can see it, the box is now viewed in 3 points perspective.
We'll of course be covering all of this in a lot more detail throughout separate videos, but now you are familiar with the horizon line and you also have a rough idea of what vanishing points are.
I also want to mention the expansion pack that I've created to go alongside Simple Perspective 3 and 4. If you want to learn more or feel as though you need some extra lessons, then do consider purchasing this pack on Patreon. It includes additional videos building on what I've covered throughout these videos. It is a paid course, but it does support what I do here with this series, and I've tried to make them as useful as possible. So it should be worth the money if you are serious about learning how to draw in perspective.
And so with all of that being said, thank you for watching and I will see you in the next video.